public services that Arlingtonians of my older stripe are used to, unless and until we can afford more. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weddle. If I could call in Ms. Rowe, who I've had a conversation, and then Mr. Sullivan, I don't know if you want to speak to the second part, the DPW and the trash barrels, but Ms. Rowe.
Well, I have a number of ideas, but one of the things that we're considering in this frugal era is to not have trash picked up in the park. So I think that may be something that's in the offing anyway. I've given a lot of thought to, I was horrified by Bruce's letter when we got it, because it's, that kind of vindictiveness is childish and really not in the spirit of what we were trying to do with the dog program. I'm suggesting that we think about having two parks, Robbins Farm Park and Menominee Rocks Park, put on probation, because it's not just Bruce's instance this time. We've had correspondence starting this fall when the program began, and I just think there are too many instances, and we get them all the time, calls from 79-year-old women who can't walk in the park. I think those two parks need to be put on notice that we're putting them on probation, and I don't know how we should do this. I actually wanted to talk to the dog officer and Joe Conley, but I just think it's gone on too long. It's the middle of the winter and we're having these problems. And I would just say to my colleagues, I think that we have to come up with some way of putting these two parks on probation. The other parks, the program seems to be working fine. These two, it does not. And see if there's a way that we can work on making people cooperate more. I think that the neighbors in Robbins Farm have been saying the same things for a very long time, and I'm surprised that they're not being taken seriously. And Menominee Rocks Park, I don't have the feeling that people are taking the program seriously in that park. And as people know, that's a beloved park to me. But I just don't think that we can continue to sit on our hands. I think we need to do something. So I'm recommending that we put both of those two parks on probation, and exactly what that means would be worked out before the February 28th, when we have a chance to talk to Joe Conley and the dog officer.
Mr. Hurd?
I was just going to suggest that we have that on the 28th agenda and have that discussion with both Joe, if you're in agreement, Brian, and try to take some steps. The correspondence that Selectman Rowe was referring to, we received through email relative to aggressive behavior at Menominee Rocks Park that actually was physical, because somebody was concerned about their own well-being. So we had proponents of the new bylaw before us recently, and they made some wonderful recommendations, and they also had suggested that they would take part in trying to convince others that aren't cooperative and aren't respectful to do so. But to your point, Clarissa, it sounds like that's not working. And I think we could honestly say we've tried to come up with a happy medium, which we did at that meeting that Mr. Whittle referred to, that had some good points to it, but certainly some negative as well. So I think we should put on the agenda, and that'll give us a couple weeks to make some decisions on what we would recommend going forward if there's going to be some significant changes. I was horrified reading this too. We made light of it, but I actually haven't had dinner yet. I read it this afternoon, but the other correspondence was equally disturbing, which was someone basically assaulting an individual allegedly. So thank you.
Ms. Rowe's motion, I believe seconded by Mr. Hurd, that we have this on the February 28th agenda, that we, through the town manager, or at the town manager's direction, come up with some guidelines. I am going to ask the town manager any comments he has. I do want to echo everything that's already been said, so don't say it again, as well as when we approved these green dog, I'm going to say it wrong and I apologize, trials, that it was a trial basis, and we said we would revisit areas that were successful and areas that weren't, and I think we've heard time and time again, Menotomy and Robbins Farm, unfortunately, are at a crisis situation, as pointed out by my colleagues. We're in the dead of winter with 4 or 5 feet of snow, and you're getting over 2 feet of dog droppings in front of your house, and that's certainly...
I tried to vary the words I used in my email.
You did a good job,
It grew and
too.
grew as it went along, and, but I understand, you know, you were making light of it, but it's a very serious issue, and to whomever is doing that, to yourself and your 2 other neighbors, if you could just kind of step back and listen to the actions that you actually did, I don't think you'd do them again, because appropriate, and that's not being an adult. But I do agree with putting Menotomy and Jason on probation. I don't know if the town manager has any comment on that, as well as Mr. Weddle pointed out, 5 years ago, we had 31 DPW workers, we now have 19, and we haven't even talked budget yet, the trash barrel situation. How do you want to handle this?
No, just a couple of comments. I will certainly meet with all the relevant departments to review the problems that are up there and come up with our recommendations for correcting them. In terms of the barrels that are up there, that clearly seems like an issue that needs to be addressed. I know DPW has raised that issue with me, and they'd like to see it changed. So I'm supportive of that, whether it's to remove them completely during the winter season or to at least move them out closer to the street so they're more easily serviced. But we will take a look at those issues and come back with a recommendation.
Okay. Any further discussion on this item? Ms. Rowe's motion, seconded by Ms. LaCourte. Any further discussion? Do I have that right? Ms. Rowe by Ms. LaCourte. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, unanimous vote. We will readdress this on the 28th. Thank you, Mr. Weber.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Anyone else here for citizens' open forum before we go to agenda item 6? Who's this stranger? Name and address for the record.
First, I apologize to all these folks here waiting to be on the agenda. And if I'm here 3 minutes from now, I grant you permission to bodily come over and pick me up and move me out, okay? Last meeting you had on the 24th during the snow removal.
Anyone who doesn't know who you
Oh,
are.
I'm sorry, Bob Radosha, Columbia Road. Last Selectmen's meeting during the discussions on snow removal. A couple of comments were made, and I think one by Mr. Sullivan, that private
Unanimous vote. Article 18, bylaw amendment, inserted at the request of Christina Chalapatis. If I said that, if I even got close, I'm lucky, but if you come to the microphone, name and address for the record, and just,
Christina
I've seen
Chalapatis,
you before, but pretend we haven't heard you before.
172 Overlook Road. I put a proposal in to amend the current bylaw to increase the fines for unleashed dogs. Through a personal experience, I discovered that in a first offense, there's only a verbal warning issued to a dog owner for an unleashed dog. And my proposal would kind of support the goal for public safety in setting up the bylaw for unleashed dogs, and also highlight to dog owners that it's important that they follow this rule and that there's going to be a monetary penalty if they don't, starting with the first offense. In my proposal, I didn't cite any guidelines for fees. I had some ideas, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to speak that. And in reviewing other laws that support the control of dogs in Arlington, I noticed that for waste disposal, there were fees, so I took that schedule as a guide, and I came up with $75 for the first offense, $100 for the second, $150 for the third, and $200 for every offense after that.
Okay, and we do have here that town council has provided to us that no fine for a bylaw violation may exceed $300, and you certainly haven't exceeded that.
Correct.
Anyone else here from the public that wishes to speak to this warrant article? Any comments from my colleagues? Ms. LaCourte?
Just that seems like a reasonable increase in the schedule, and then it feels to me like unless we are able to put some teeth into this bylaw, we're going to have a great deal of difficulty dealing with the issues that we have in the several parks that we just discussed. Particularly if the first offense is a warning, it's possible for the dog officer to never see that person again. Just the number of areas in which we have violations, the amount of territory that has to be policed, et cetera, the ability to, the first time he has to request somebody who's violating the law to put their dog on a leash, his ability to write a ticket at that moment, I believe will make a big difference. Deferring, however, to the town manager if he has a different feeling.
Ms. Rowe, and then Mr.
Well,
Sullivan.
I was going to ask Mr. Sullivan what the dog officer and the police chief think of this.
Yeah, we haven't referred it to them.
I would prefer not to vote on it until I mean, I know in the past, when I've called the police chief to ask him to enforce this law, he has been loath to do it. It's a hard thing for the dog officer to, he doesn't like writing tickets. He'd rather educate people. And, I think we need to talk to the personnel that have to enforce it. So I'd like to delay it until they give an opinion on the fines, if we could.
If I could just share something with you in a discussion I had with the dog officer. He did state that he really didn't have a tool to enforce the rule with the first offense, and that he had numerous complaints regarding actual injuries by dogs, that he really couldn't do anything for the town residents in that case. And I think that a rule such as this is just going to put, it's a work in progress. Everything's a work in progress, and it's just going to help move us to a more safe situation, and also, serve the needs of dog owners as well. And there are those dog owners who are responsible, but there are those that are not really, looking at their neighbors and paying attention to what their neighbors need as well. So that was something
Right.
that he shared with me.
And I think that he probably is right, but it might be easier for him if the town manager asked the police chief and they had a conversation about it. I would just feel better about that. I mean, I happen to agree with you, but I'd like to just talk to the enforcement arm of what we do, make sure that they're on board with it.
Okay. All right, thank
So
you.
Ms. Rowe's motion to have this appear on the February 28th
Yes, please.
agenda, with final wording that...
Recommendation from the
Recommendation.
police chief.
That recommendation from what we currently have, first offense, which is warning, second offense, $50, third, $75, and fourth, $100 fine, and put forth the proponent's recommendation of first offense, $75, second, $100, third, $150, fourth, $200, and ask them if perhaps giving somebody a $75 ticket could help educate them more on the first offense versus than just giving them a piece of paper, or some other fee structure. And then come before us on the 28th for a final vote.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Rowe, seconded by Mr. Hurd. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, unanimous vote. You're welcome to definitely come back. I don't mean to make you keep coming out. That's okay. Try to get to you more expeditiously. Then we have Article 19, inserted at the request of the Arlington Bicycle Advisory Committee. Is anybody here? I see Joey.